When a runaway woman stumbles onto a struggling farm, the last thing either expects is love. But as her past closes in, can a broken man protect the woman who brought his land and heart back to life? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun cast long shadows across Silver Oak Farm as Luke Jennings inspected the damage from last night's storm. At 30 years old, he had the weathered hands of someone who'd spent his life working the land. But his eyes still held a gentleness that contradicted his rugged appearance. The wind had torn off several roof shingles from the greenhouse, and he knew he'd need to fix them before the day grew too hot. Another day, another dollar, he muttered to himself, climbing down from the ladder and wiping sweat from his brow. Silver Oak Farm had been in the Jennings family for 3 generations. When Luke's parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, he had taken over the property with determination to keep their legacy alive. The farm was known throughout the county for its organic produce and the beautiful silver oak trees that lined the entrance path, giving the place its name. Luke walked back to the main house, a 2-story farmhouse with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beside it stood a smaller guest house that had once been used for seasonal workers but now sat mostly empty. Business had been tough lately, and Luke couldn't afford to hire the help he needed. Inside, he poured himself a cup of coffee and checked his to-do list for the day. The farm stand needed restocking, the north field needed irrigation work, and he still hadn't figured out how to fix the tractor that had broken down last week. Too much work and too little time. The sound of tires on gravel caught his attention. Luke wasn't expecting visitors, especially not this early. He stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, and watched as an old blue sedan made its way up the long driveway. The car stopped, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and a young woman stepped out. She stood there, for a moment, looking around nervously before her eyes settled on Luke. Even from a distance, he could see the exhaustion on her face. She walked toward him slowly, clutching a small bag to her chest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes looked worn but clean. As she got closer, Luke noticed how she kept her eyes down, avoiding his gaze. "Good morning," Luke said, trying to sound friendly. "Can I help you with something?" The woman stopped at the foot of the porch steps. "I saw your sign on the highway," she said quietly. "It said you might need workers." Luke frowned slightly. That sign had been up for months, but he'd taken it down last week when he realized he couldn't afford to pay anyone. Someone must have put it back up. "I'm sorry," he began, "but I don't want trouble," she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do anything. I just need a chance." Something in her tone made Luke pause. He looked at her more carefully now, the way her shoulders hunched forward as if expecting a blow, the nervous way her fingers clutched her bag, the exhaustion that seemed to seep from her very being. This wasn't just someone looking for work, this was someone running from something. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Valeria," she replied. "Valeria Cruz." Luke set his coffee mug on the porch railing and took a step toward her. "Do you have experience working on a farm, Valeria?" She shook her head. "Not really. But I'm a fast learner. I can clean, cook, organize, whatever you need." Luke should have turned her away. The farm was barely staying afloat as it was. But something about Valeria's desperate plea touched something inside him. "I can't offer much," he said. "Just room and board, and maybe a small wage when things pick up." Hope flickered across her face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Luke replied. "Just honest work for honest pay. And here, you'll be treated like a queen." The words came out before he could think about them, but once said, he knew he meant them. There was something about this woman that stirred his protective instincts. Valeria's eyes widened slightly, and Luke noticed how she flinched at his words, as if kindness was something she had learned to be wary of. "I don't need special treatment," she said stiffly. "Just a fair chance." Luke nodded, understanding. "That's all I'm offering, a fair chance." He gestured toward the guest house. "There's a room ready in there, nothing fancy, but it's clean and private. Why don't you get settled in, and then we can talk more about the work." Valeria hesitated, looking from Luke to the guest house and back again. Trust didn't come easily to her, that much was clear. "The door has a lock," Luke added, guessing her concern, "and I never go in there without knocking first." This seemed to ease her mind slightly. She nodded and picked up her bag from where she'd set it on the ground. "Thank you," she said, so quietly Luke almost didn't hear it. As Valeria walked toward the guest house, Luke watched her go with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Who was this woman, and what had happened to make her so guarded? He had a feeling there was much more to Valeria Cruz than met the eye. Inside the guest house, Valeria closed the door behind her and immediately checked the lock. It worked. She let out a breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding and looked around the room. It was simple but comfortable, a double bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, a desk with a chair, and a window that overlooked a garden. The bathroom was small but clean, with fresh towels folded on a shelf, better than anywhere she'd stayed in months. Valeria sat on the edge of the bed, still not quite believing her luck. When she'd seen the sign for Silver Oak Farm, She'd been running on fumes, both literally in her car and figuratively in her life, after David, her ex-boyfriend, had kicked her out of their apartment and spread rumors about her at work. Leading to her firing, Valeria had felt like the whole world was against her. She'd been driving for days, sleeping in her car at rest, which stops, taking odd jobs for cash when she could find them. The sign for Silver Oak Farm had seemed like a last-ditch effort before she had to admit defeat and call her sister something she desperately wanted to avoid. And now here she was, with a roof over her head and the promise of work. The farmer looked decent enough, but Valeria had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Men like David started out charming too, until they showed their true colors. Just get through one day at a time, she whispered to herself, a mantra she'd repeated countless times over the past few months. She unpacked her meager belongings, a few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a worn paperback novel, and a small framed photo of her parents, both long gone now. Then she splashed water on her face, smoothed her hair, and prepared to face whatever challenges this farm might bring. Outside, Luke was already at work fixing the greenhouse roof. He worked methodically, replacing damaged panels and securing loose ones. The physical labor helped clear his mind, which kept drifting back to his new employee. There was something about Valeria Cruz that tugged at him, the wariness in her eyes, the way she held herself as if expecting the worst. Luke recognized the signs of someone who'd been hurt. He'd seen that same look in his own eyes after his parents died, when grief had nearly consumed him by midday. The sun was beating down mercilessly. Luke climbed down from the greenhouse roof, wiping sweat from his face with the hem of his t-shirt. He needed water and a break from the heat. As he approached the main house, he was surprised to see Valeria sitting on the porch steps. She stood quickly when she saw him coming. "I wasn't sure where to find you," she said. "I wanted to start working." Luke gestured toward the pitcher of water on the porch table. "Have some water first. It's too hot to rush into anything." Valeria accepted a glass gratefully, and Luke noticed how her hands trembled slightly. "When's the last time you ate something?" he asked. She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "Yesterday, I think," without another word. Luke headed into the house and returned moments later with a plate holding a sandwich and some apple slices. "Eat," he said, placing it beside her. "We can talk about work after." Valeria looked at the food suspiciously, then back at Luke. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," Luke replied evenly. "It's lunch. Can't have you passing out on your first day. Bad for business." A ghost of a smile touched Valeria's lips, so brief Luke almost missed it. She picked up the sandwich and took a small bite, then a larger one as her hunger took over. Luke sat on the steps a respectful distance away, sipping his water and giving her space to eat. "So," he said after a while, "what brings you to Silver Oak Farm? We're pretty far off the beaten path." Valeria stiffened. "Just looking for work," she said, her tone making it clear she didn't want to elaborate. Luke nodded, accepting her privacy. "Fair enough. Everyone's got their story. You don't have to share yours if you don't want to." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the distant call of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. "I could help with the greenhouse," Valeria finally said. "I noticed it was damaged." "You know anything about greenhouse maintenance?" Luke asked. "No," she admitted. "But like I said, I'm a fast learner." Luke studied her for a moment. Despite her obvious exhaustion, there was determination in her eyes. "All right then, we'll start with the basics. But first, let me show you around the place so you know what you're getting into." The tour of Silver Oak Farm took longer than Luke had expected. He found himself explaining not just the work that needed doing, but the history of the place, the types of crops they grew, and his plans for the future. Valeria listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that surprised him with that insight. "So it's just you running all this?" she asked as they walked back toward the greenhouse. Luke nodded. "Used to have more help, but times have been tough. The big agricultural companies are pushing out small farms like this one. People want cheap produce, not quality." "That's not right," Valeria said with unexpected passion. "Places like this matter." Luke glanced at her, surprised by her vehemence. "Yeah, they do, but not everyone sees it that way." In the greenhouse, Luke showed Valeria how to check the irrigation system and identify plants that needed attention. She was a quick study, memorizing the names of herbs and vegetables, asking about their growing conditions. "You sure you haven't done this before?" Luke asked, impressed by how quickly she caught on. Valeria shook her head. "My mother had a small garden when I was young. Nothing like this. But I used to help her." It was the first personal detail she'd shared, and Luke recognized it as the small gesture of trust that it was. By late afternoon, they had worked side by side in comfortable silence, Valeria helping Luke repair the last of the greenhouse damage. The physical labor seemed to ease some of the tension from her shoulders, and once or twice, Luke caught her looking at the plants with something close to wonder. "That's enough for today," Luke said as the sun began to lower in the sky. "You must be tired after traveling." Valeria wiped her hands on her jeans. "I can do more if you need." "Tomorrow's another day," Luke replied. "Why don't you get some rest? I'll make dinner at the main house around 7 if you want to join me." Uncertainty flickered across her face. "I can make my own food. I don't want to impose." It's no imposition, Luke assured her. I always make too much anyway. But no pressure. The guest house has a small kitchenette if you'd rather eat alone. Valeria nodded, relieved at having the choice. Thank you. As she walked back to the guest house, Luke watched her go, struck by the contradiction of her wariness that bordered on fear, but also the quiet strength he sensed beneath it. Whatever had happened to Valeria Cruz, it hadn't broken her spirit entirely. Luke returned to the main house and began preparing a simple dinner of chicken, roasted vegetables and rice. He set the table for two, though he wasn't sure if Valeria would join him. Either way, he'd make a plate for her. At precisely 7 o'clock there was a soft knock at the door. Luke opened it to find Valeria standing there, her hair damp from a shower, wearing clean clothes that were slightly too big for her slender frame. I thought I'd take you up on dinner, she said, her voice still quiet but steadier than before. If the offer still stands. Always, Luke replied with a smile, stepping aside to let her in. Come on in. Dinner was a quiet affair. Luke didn't, with push for conversation. Sensing that Valeria needed the space to adjust, she ate hungrily but neatly, complimenting the food with genuine appreciation. This is really good, she said. You cook often? Luke nodded. Had to learn after my parents died. It was either that or live on sandwiches and cereal. I'm sorry about your parents, Valeria said softly. Thank you, Luke replied. It was 5 years ago, car accident. Valeria nodded, understanding in her EIS mine had gone too. Mom when I was 16, Dad 2 years later. It was another small piece of herself offered up, and Luke recognized the trust it represented. It's hard, he said simply. Being on your own. Yes, Valeria agreed, meeting his eyes briefly before looking away. It is after dinner. Valeria insisted on helping with the dishes. They worked in tandem, Luke washing while Valeria dried, falling into an easy rhythm as if they'd done this many times before. I should get back to the guest house, Valeria said when they finished. What time should I start tomorrow? I'm usually up around 5, Luke replied. But you can start whenever you're ready. The farm will still be here. Valeria nodded, heading toward the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. Luke, she said, not turning round. Thank you. For today. Before Luke could respond, she was gone, slipping out into the night like a shadow. Luke watched through the window as she walked quickly back to the guest house, noticing how she glanced over her shoulder twice before going inside. Who or what? Was she afraid of? The question nagged at him as he locked up for the night and prepared for bed. Whatever Valeria's story was, Luke had a feeling it wasn't a happy one. But she was here now, and somehow, he knew that mattered. Silver Oak Farm had always been a place of healing for him after his parents died. Maybe it could be that for Valeria too. With that thought, he drifted off to sleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring with his mysterious new farmhand on the guest house. Valeria lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside. At night, the room was comfortable, the bed softer than anything she'd slept on in months. But sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Luke Jennings and his unexpected kindness. Here you'll be treated like a queen, he had said. Such a strange thing to say to someone you've just met. Someone asking for work out of desperation. In Valeria's experience, men who offered things that seemed too good to be true usually wanted something in return. But Luke had asked for nothing, had respected her space, had been kind without expectation. It unsettled her, this kindness. She didn't know how to respond to it, how to categorize it in a world that had shown her primarily indifference and cruelty. Don't get comfortable, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Don't get attached. Silver Oak Farm was just a temporary stop, a place to catch her breath before moving on. She couldn't afford to let down her guard, couldn't risk being hurt again. But as she finally drifted toward sleep, Valeria couldn't help but feel a small spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this place could be different. Morning came too soon. Sunlight streaming through the window and waking Valeria from the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was, panic rising in her throat. Then the events of yesterday came back to her. Silver Oak Farm, Luke Jennings, the greenhouse. She dressed quickly and stepped outside. The farm was already alive with activity in the distance. She could see Luke working in the fields, the early morning sun glinting off the tractor. Birds called from the silver oaks lining the drive, and somewhere a rooster crowed belatedly. Taking a deep breath of the clean country air, Valeria squared her shoulders and headed toward the fields. She wasn't sure what the day would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. Luke saw her coming and waved, a simple gesture of welcome that somehow made Valeria feel like maybe, just maybe, she had found a safe harbor in the storm of her life. 2 weeks passed quickly at Silver Oak Farm. Valeria fell into a routine that brought an unexpected comfort to her days. She woke early, often finding Luke already at work in the fields or the barn. They would share a simple breakfast, usually coffee and toast, before tackling the day's tasks together. Luke was patient, teaching Valeria everything from how to check soil moisture to the best way to harvest delicate herbs without damaging the plants. She was indeed a fast learner, and by the end of the second week, she could identify most of the crops growing in the fields and greenhouse. One warm morning, Luke found Valeria already in the greenhouse, carefully inspecting the tomato plants for signs of disease. "You're up early," he said, setting down a tray with 2 mugs of coffee. Valeria looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She still wore that guarded expression, but it had softened slightly over the days. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Thought I might as well make myself useful." Luke handed her a mug. "You're already plenty useful. These tomatoes look better than they have all season." A hint of color touched Valeria's cheeks at the compliment. "I just followed what you showed me and added your own touch," Luke said, noticing how she'd arranged the support stakes to give the plants more room to grow. "You have good instincts." They worked in companionable silence for a while, Valeria tending to the tomatoes while Luke checked the irrigation system. It was these quiet moments that had begun to build a bridge between them. No pressure to talk, just shared work and purpose. "I'm heading into town for supplies today," Luke said as they finished up. "Want to come along? Might be good for you to see more than just the farm." Valeria tensed visibly. "I don't think so," she said quickly. "I'd rather stay here." Luke didn't push. "Sure. There's plenty to do here if you prefer. The farm stand could use restocking if you want to gather some produce." Relief washed over Valeria's face. "I can do that." Luke nodded, understanding her reluctance without knowing its cause. Whatever had happened to Valeria, it had made her wary of people, of towns, of anything beyond the safety of Silver Oak Farm. "I'll be back by early afternoon," he said. "If you need anything, Mrs. Henley is just down the road. You can see her mailbox from the end of the drive." "I'll be fine," Valeria assured him. Already turning back to the plants, Luke watched her for a moment longer before heading out. In the 2 weeks Valeria had been at Silver Oak, she'd revealed almost nothing about her past. She worked hard, kept to herself, and flinched at unexpected sounds or movements. Luke had his suspicions about what might have happened to her, but he didn't ask. She would share her story if she was ready. The drive into town gave Luke time to think. Having Valeria at the farm had changed things in ways he hadn't expected. The place felt different, somehow less lonely, more purposeful. She brought a quiet energy to the work, approaching each task with a determination that impressed him. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, he caught glimpses of a different Valeria, one who smiled at butterflies in the garden or hummed softly while picking herbs. In town, Luke completed his errands efficiently, picking up feed, supplies, and groceries. At the hardware store, he found himself lingering in the gardening section, looking at a display of flower seeds. On impulse, he added several packets to his cart. Marigolds, zinnias, sunflowers, bright, cheerful blooms that might bring some color to the farm. As he was loading his truck, a familiar voice called his name. Luke turned to see Mike Dawson, an old high school friend who now served as the town's sheriff. "Luke, haven't seen you in a while," Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. "How's the farm?" "Managing," Luke replied with a smile. "You know how it is." Mike nodded knowingly. "Heard you might have some help these days. New girl staying out at your place." Luke stiffened slightly. Small towns and their gossip, he should have expected this. "Just hired some help for the season," he said casually. "Nothing worth talking about." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Well, if she's staying at your place, folks are gonna talk. That's just how it is around here." "She's staying in the guest house," Luke clarified, "and working for room and board. It's a business arrangement." Sure, Mike said with a knowing smirk. "Just giving you a heads up. You know how people get when a single man and woman are living on the same property." Luke loaded the last bag into his truck with more force than necessary. People should mind their own business. "Hey, no offense meant." Mike held up his hands. "Just looking out for a friend," Luke sighed, his irritation fading. "I know, sorry, it's just, she's had a rough time, I think, doesn't need people gossiping about her." Mike's expression sobered. "Understood. Everything all right out there though?" No trouble, Luke assured him. "She's a hard worker, keeps to herself." Mike nodded. "Well, you need anything, you know where to find me." Back at the farm, Luke found the farm stand beautifully arranged with fresh produce. Valeria had organized everything by type and color, creating an appealing display that would surely attract customers. She was nowhere to be seen though, and Luke felt a momentary flicker of concern until he spotted movement in the flower garden near the main house. Valeria was on her knees, weeding among the perennials that Luke's mother had planted years ago. She looked up as his truck approached, quickly getting to her feet and brushing dirt from her jeans. "The farm stand's ready," she called as Luke climbed out of the truck. "I picked what looked ripest." "It looks great," Luke said, walking over to her. "You've got a good eye for presentation." Valeria shrugged, but he could tell she was pleased by the compliment. "I used to arrange displays at a store I worked at," she said, then stopped abruptly. As if she'd revealed too much, Luke pretended not to notice her sudden discomfort. "What it shows. Customers will be impressed." He gestured to the garden around them. "You didn't have to tackle this, you know. These old flower beds are more for looks than business." I don't mind, Valeria said, looking down at the freshly weeded soil. It's peaceful here, and the flowers. They deserve a chance to grow without being choked by weeds. Something in her tone made Luke wonder if she was still talking about flowers. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the seed packets he'd bought in town. I picked these up today, he said, holding them out to her. Thought you might like to plant them somewhere. Add some new color to the place. Valeria took the packets, genuine surprise crossing her face. You bought these for me to plant? For the farm, Luke said quickly, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. But yes, I thought you might enjoy the project. You seem to have a way with growing things. Valeria ran her fingers over the colorful packets, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Thank you, she said softly. I know just where they'd look nice. That evening, after a simple dinner of pasta and vegetables from the garden, Luke and Valeria sat on the porch watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. These quiet moments had become part of their routine, not quite together, not quite apart, sharing space without demands. My mother loved fireflies, Valeria said unexpectedly. She used to say they were like stars that came down to earth to remind us that magic is everywhere. Luke smiled at the image. That's a nice thought. My dad was more practical. He'd tell me they were nature's way of helping farmers know when to harvest certain crops. Valeria laughed softly, the sound so rare that Luke found himself holding his breath, afraid to break the spell of the moment. Was your dad a farmer his whole life? She asked. Luke nodded. Third generation on this land. My grandfather started with just 20 acres. Dad expanded it to what we have now, about 100 acres, all told, though not all of it's cultivated. And did you always want to be a farmer? It was the first time Valeria had asked him a personal question, and Luke took it as the milestone it was. Not always, he admitted. I went to college for business, thought I'd work in the city for a while, but then my senior year, my parents had the accident, came back to handle the funeral and never left. Do you regret it? Valeria asked, her eyes on the distant tree line. Luke considered the question carefully. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if things had gone differently. But no, I don't regret staying. This place, it's more than land and crops, it's home. Valeria nodded, understanding in her silence. After a moment, she spoke. Again, her voice so low Luke had to lean in to hear her. I had a home once, an apartment in the city, nothing special, but it was mine, or I thought it was. Luke remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might cause her to retreat back into silence. My ex-boyfriend kicked me. Howard said I had a week to find somewhere else to live. Valeria's hands tightened around her knees. When I protested, he got angry, said things, did things. She fell silent and Luke fought the urge to reach out to her. Instead, he kept his voice gentle. I'm sorry that happened to you, Valeria shrugged, a jerky movement that betrayed her emotion. It wasn't the first time he'd been angry, but it was the worst. I packed what I could fit in my car and left that night, slept in my car for a while, took odd jobs. Then he found me at work one day, made a scene, got me fired. The pieces began to fall into place for Luke, her wariness, her reluctance to go into town, the way she startled at loud noises. He kept finding me, Valeria continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. Wherever I went, it was like he wouldn't let me have a life without him, even though he didn't want me in his life anymore. So I kept driving, kept moving, until my car broke down near your sign. Luke absorbed her story, anger building inside him at the man who had hurt her, had hunted her, but he kept his voice calm. You're safe here, Valeria. I promise you that. She looked at him then, really looked at him, searching his face as if trying to determine if his words were truth or just another empty promise. You can't know that, she said finally. You don't know him, what he's capable of. Maybe not, Luke acknowledged, but I know this land. I know the people around here who would help if needed, and I know that you deserve peace. Valeria's eyes glistened with unshed tears in the fading light. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. The question caught Luke off guard. I know enough, he said after a moment. I know you're hardworking and honest. I know you care about things, the plants, the flowers. I know you've been hurt and still have the courage to trust a stranger with your story. He gestured to the farm around them. This place has always been a sanctuary for me. It can be that for you, too, for as long as you need. A single tear slipped down Valeria's cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. I should get some rest, she said, rising abruptly. Early day tomorrow. Luke nodded, understanding her need to retreat after revealing so much. Good night, Valeria. Good night, Luke, she replied, pausing at the top of the porch steps, and thank you for listening. As she walked toward the guest house, Luke remained on the porch watching to make sure she reached her door safely. Only when she was inside did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Valeria's story had confirmed his suspicions, but knowing the truth only strengthened his resolve to make Silver Oak Farm a place where she could heal. She deserved that much. At least till the next morning, Luke woke to the sound of rain tapping gently against the windows. Perfect weather for office work, updating the farm accounts, planning the next planting cycle. tasks he'd been putting off in favor of fieldwork. He expected Valeria to sleep in, given the rain, but was surprised to find her already in the kitchen when he came downstairs, making coffee. "Hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the coffee maker. "I saw the rain and thought it might be a good day for indoor work." "Great minds think alike," Luke replied with a smile. "I was just planning to tackle the accounts today." Valeria poured coffee into 2 mugs. "I'm good with numbers, if you need help. I was an accounting clerk before everything." Luke accepted the mug she offered. "Really, that would be amazing. The books are a mess, I'm afraid. Not my strong suit." For the first time since her arrival, Valeria smiled without reservation, a real smile that transformed her face. "Show me what you've got. I love a good organizational challenge." They set up at the dining room table, Luke bringing out folders of receipts, invoices, and bank statements. Valeria dove in with unexpected enthusiasm, sorting the paperwork into neat piles and creating a system that made immediate sense. "My lunchtime." She had a clear picture of the farm's financial situation, which was more precarious than Luke had realized. "You're operating at a loss," she said gently, showing him the figures she'd calculated. "Not by much, but it's adding up month after month." Luke ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "I was afraid of that. The big farms can sell cheaper than I can produce, and the weather hasn't helped. Too much rain last spring, that early frost in the fall." Valeria tapped her pen against the table, thinking. "Have you considered diversifying? The organic produce is good, but what about value-added products? Jams, pickles, that sort of thing. You could charge a premium." Luke looked at her with newfound respect. "I've thought about it, but never had the time to research or set it up." "I could help," Valeria offered hesitantly. "Research costs, suppliers, regulations. It would be a way to pay you back for your kindness." "You don't owe me anything," Luke said firmly. "But if you want to take this on, I'd be grateful. You clearly have skills I don't." Valeria nodded, something like purpose lighting her eyes. "I'll start today. And we should look at your pricing too. I think you're undercharging for some items. Based on what I've seen at farmers markets." They spent the rest of the rainy day working side by side, Valeria organizing the farm's finances while Luke caught up on correspondence and orders. It felt natural, comfortable, as if they'd been working together for years rather than weeks. When evening came, the rain had stopped, leaving the world outside fresh and clean. Luke made a simple dinner of soup and bread, which they ate at the kitchen table while discussing Valeria's ideas for the farm. "We could start small," she was saying, animated in a way Luke had never seen her. "Maybe herb-infused vinegars, or honey if you know any local beekeepers. Low investment to test the market." Luke found himself caught up in her enthusiasm. "There's old canning equipment in the barn that was my grandmother's. We could probably use that for jams and preserves." "Perfect," Valeria exclaimed. "And we could create gift baskets for the holidays. Organic produce, preserves, maybe some of those flowers we're planting turned into dried arrangements." Luke asked quietly. Valeria froze, suddenly realizing the assumption she'd made. I just thought. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have presumed I'd still be here by then." "No, that's not what I meant," Luke said quickly. "I just, I'm glad you're thinking long-term that you might want to stay." Color rose in Valeria's cheeks. "I don't know what I want yet," she said honestly. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm thinking about the future instead of just getting through the day. That's something. It's everything," Luke replied softly. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Valeria stood, gathering their empty bowls. "I should clean up and get back to the guest house. Early start tomorrow if we want to implement some of these ideas." Luke let her go, understanding that she needed space to process this shift in their relationship. Whatever was growing between them, friendship, partnership, perhaps something more, it needed time and patience. The next few days brought sunny weather and a flurry of activity as they began implementing Valeria's ideas. Luke cleared space in the barn for a small production area, while Valeria researched regulations for selling homemade food products and designed labels on Luke's old laptop. They worked well together, each bringing different strengths to the partnership. Luke knew farming and the local market. Valeria brought business acumen and a fresh perspective. By the end of the week, they had produced their first test batches of herb-infused olive oil and strawberry jam, with plans for more varieties if these sold well. On Saturday morning, they loaded the farm truck with fresh produce and their new products for the farmers market in town. Luke had expected Valeria to stay behind, given her reluctance to leave the farm, but she surprised him. "I want to go," she said, though he could see the anxiety in her eyes. "I need to see how customers respond to the products, and I can't hide forever." Luke admired her courage. "We'll stay together the whole time," he promised. "And if it gets to be too much, we can leave." The farmers market was busy when they arrived. Local families and weekend tourists browsing the stalls for fresh produce and handmade goods. Luke set up their booth with Valeria's help, arranging the display according to her suggestions. "It looks great," he said when they finished. "Professional, like we've been doing this for years." Valeria managed a small smile. though Luke could see how tightly wound she was, her eyes constantly scanning the crowd. The first customers approached and Valeria stepped back, letting Luke handle the interaction. But as the morning progressed, she gradually became more comfortable, even explaining the process behind their urban-fused oils to an interested elderly couple. By midday, they had sold nearly all their produce and half of their new products. Valeria's pricing strategy had proven accurate. Customers were willing to pay more for quality, especially with the attractive packaging and clear labeling she had designed. "I need to get more change from the truck," Luke said during a lull. "Will you be okay for a minute?" Valeria nodded, though he could see her tension return at the thought of being alone. "I'll be fine, don't be long." Luke hurried to the parking area, wanting to get back to Valeria as quickly as possible. He was searching for his wallet in the glove compartment when he heard raised voices from the direction of their booth. Moving quickly through the crowd, Luke saw a man standing at their stall, leaning over the table toward Valeria, who had backed up as far as she could against the display behind her. Even from a distance, Luke could see the fear on her face. "David, please," he heard her say as he got closer. "Just leave me alone. You think you can just disappear?" The man David replied, his voice sharp with anger. "After everything, you owe me, Valeria." Luke was at the booth in seconds, positioning himself between Valeria and the man. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, keeping his voice level despite the anger building inside him. David looked Luke up and down, contempt clear in his expression. "This doesn't concern you, farmer. This is between me and my girlfriend." "Excro," Valeria said, her voice shaking but determined. "And I don't owe you anything, David." David's face darkened. "The hell you don't. Who paid the rent while you were finding yourself? Who put up with your moods, your constant whining? You think you can just walk away from that?" Luke felt Valeria flinch behind him. "Sir," he said firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disturbing our customers." David laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Playing the hero, are you? Did she tell you what she's really like? How she used you until she gets bored or finds someone better?" "That's enough," Luke said, his patience wearing thin. "Leave now, or I'll call security." David took a step closer, lowering his voice. "She's damaged goods, you know, not worth the trouble." Something snapped inside Luke. Before he could think better of it, he had grabbed David by the collar of his expensive shirt. "Don't you ever talk about her like that again," he growled. "She deserves better than you ever gave her." David's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "You'll regret this," he hissed, pulling away from Luke's grip. "Both of you." With one last venomous look at Valeria, he turned and stalked away through the crowd. Luke turned to find Valeria trembling, her face pale. "Are you okay?" he asked, gently. She shook her head, tears threatening. "We need to go, now please." Without hesitation, Luke began packing up their booth, quickly boxing the remaining products while Valeria stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. "I'll be right back with the truck," Luke told her, touching her arm lightly. "Will you be all right for a moment?" Valeria nodded, though she wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry he found me here." "This isn't your fault," Luke said firmly. "None of it. I'll be right back." He hurried to get the truck, anger and concern battling inside him. David's appearance confirmed everything Valeria had told him and more. The man was controlling, manipulative, and clearly used to getting his way. No wonder Valeria had been so afraid. When Luke pulled up with the truck, Valeria was waiting with their packed goods, her face a mask of control that didn't quite hide the turmoil beneath. They loaded up in silence and headed back to Silver Oak Farm. Valeria didn't speak during the drive, staring out the window with unseeing eyes. Luke didn't push, giving her the space to process what had happened. Only when they turned onto the long driveway of the farm did she finally break the silence. "He'll come here next," she said dully. "He always finds me." Luke's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "If he does, he'll be trespassing. I can have him removed." "You don't understand," Valeria said, turning to look at him with pain-filled eyes. "He won't stop. He never stops. I should never have gone to the market. I should have known better." Luke parked the truck in front of the main house and turned to face her. "Valeria, listen to me. What happened today is not your fault. You have every right to go where you want, do what you want, without fear. But that's not how the world works," she replied bitterly. "Not for me. I've tried running. I've tried hiding. He always finds me." "Then maybe it's time to stop running," Luke said quietly. "Maybe it's time to stand your ground." Valeria looked at him in disbelief. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Luke acknowledged. "But you're not alone anymore. You have me now. And I promise you, Valeria, I will not let him hurt you again." For a long moment, Valeria stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. Then, to Luke's surprise, she reached out and touched his hand, the first time she had initiated contact between them. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do this for me? Risk your safety, your farm?" Luke turned his hand over, gently clasping hers. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, because you've become important to me. And because here on this farm, you are a queen, Valeria, and no one gets to take that away from you." A single tear slipped down Valeria's cheek as Luke's words from their first meeting echoed back. This time, she didn't flinch away from them. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I know," Luke replied, squeezing her hand gently. "But we'll figure this out together." And in that moment, something shifted between them, a deepening of trust, a promise made and accepted. Whatever came next, they would face it not as employer and employee, not even just as friends, but as partners who had found each other when they needed it most. The encounter with David at the farmer's market cast a shadow over Silver Oak Farm. In the days that followed, Valeria jumped at every sound, her hard-won comfort replaced by constant vigilance. Luke noticed how she checked the locks repeatedly, how her eyes scanned the tree line when they worked in the fields, how she retreated to the guest house earlier each evening. He wanted to reassure her, to promise that David wouldn't find them, but he knew better than to make promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he focused on practical measures, installing motion sensor lights around the property, making sure his phone was always charged, keeping the sheriff's number handy. A week after the farmer's market incident, Luke found Valeria in the greenhouse, mindlessly pulling at the same plant over and over. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "You're going to uproot that poor tomato if you keep at it." Valeria looked down, seeming surprised to find the plant in her hands. "Sorry," she murmured. "I was thinking." Luke leaned against the workbench, want to share those thoughts. She straightened up, brushing soil from her fingers. "I can't keep living like this, jumping at shadows, waiting for him to show up." Her voice strengthened with determination. "And I can't keep putting you and the farm at risk." "Valeria," Luke began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Please, let me finish. I've been thinking about this all week." She took a deep breath. "I need to face this head on. Get a restraining order. Make it official. I've been running for so long I forgot there are legal ways to handle this." Luke felt a surge of admiration for her courage. "That's a good plan, but you should know, you're not putting me or the farm at risk. We're in this together." Valeria looked at him, really looked at him, in a way she rarely did. "Why, Luke? Why are you so willing to get involved in my mess?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken possibilities. Luke considered his words carefully, knowing how much was at stake. "Because when you walked up that driveway, something changed here. This place was just existing before, crops growing, seasons changing, but no real life to it." He gestured. "Around them now, there's purpose again. Ideas, a future." He took a step closer to her. "And because I care about you, Valeria, more than I expected to, more than might be wise." Valeria's breath caught, her eyes widening at his confession. For a moment, Luke thought he'd said too much, pushed it too far. Then she reached out, tentatively placing her hand on his arm. "I care about you too," she said softly, "and it terrifies me. Because everyone I've ever cared about has either left or hurt me." Luke covered her hand with his own. "I can't promise I'll never hurt you. People hurt each other sometimes without meaning to. But I can promise I'll never intentionally cause you pain, and I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." Tears welled in Valeria's eyes. "I don't want you to go anywhere. That's what scares me most of all." Luke gently pulled her into an embrace, half expecting her to stiffen or pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her head resting against his chest as if finding home after a long journey. "We'll figure this out," he murmured into her hair, "one step at a time." The next day, Luke drove Valeria to the county courthouse to file for a restraining order. She was quiet during the drive, clutching a folder containing the documentation she'd gathered, photos of bruises from months ago that she'd kept as evidence, screenshots of threatening texts, a timeline of stalking incidents dotted the courthouse. A sympathetic clerk helped Valeria navigate the paperwork. When asked for her address, she hesitated, pen hovering over the form. "Use the farm," Luke said quietly. "It's your home now, if you want it to be." Valeria's hand trembled slightly as she wrote down the address of Silver Oak Farm, making it official. Putting down roots after months of running, it was a bigger step than she'd realized. The temporary restraining order was granted that same day, with a court date set for the following month to make it permanent. As they left the courthouse, Valeria walked taller, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "How do you feel?" Luke asked as they drove back to the farm. "Scared," Valeria admitted, "but also powerful, in a way I haven't felt in a long time, like I'm taking back control." Luke reached across the seat to squeeze her hand. "You are, and I'm proud of you." Back at the farm, they settled into a new normal. The restraining order didn't make Valeria's fear disappear completely, but it gave her something tangible to hold on to, legal protection, a system on her side for once. They continued developing new products for the farm, with Valeria's urban oils becoming particularly popular at local shops. Luke cleared more space in the barn, setting up a proper production area with shelving and a large work table. Valeria's financial management began to turn things around, with the farm showing its first profit in over a year. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Luke brought up something that had been on his mind. "I've been thinking about the guest house," he said casually. "It needs some improvements if it's going to be a long-term home." Valeria looked at him, surprised. "What kind of improvements?" "Better insulation for winter, for one. Maybe expand the kitchenette into a proper kitchen. What do you think? Valeria was quiet for a moment, processing the implication of his words. You're asking if I'm staying, she said finally. Luke nodded. I am no pressure, but if you're planning to stick around, I want you to be comfortable. I'd like that, Valeria said softly, making the guest house more of a home. Staying here, she paused, then added, with you. The simple admission made Luke's heart soar. He reached for her hand, and she interlaced her fingers with his, a gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. Good, he said simply. That's good. The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity. Beyond their regular farm work, they began renovations on the guest house, with Luke tearing out the old kitchenette and installing new cabinets and appliances. Valeria painted the walls a soft sage green and added curtains she'd found at a thrift store. They worked side by side, transforming the small building into a cozy home. In the evenings, they would collapse onto the porch swing, tired but satisfied with their progress. Sometimes they talked about the future plans for the farm, new product ideas, markets they could expand into. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, the need for words fading as their understanding of each other deepened. The flowers Valeria had planted from the seeds Luke gave her were blooming now, creating a riot of color along the path from the main house to the guest house. She tended them daily, taking special pride in the sunflowers that had grown taller than anyone expected. They're reaching for the sky, Luke commented one morning as they admired the towering yellow blooms. Like they know there's something worth stretching for, Valeria replied. And Luke knew she wasn't just talking about flowers. The court date for the permanent restraining order arrived, and Valeria dressed carefully in her best clothes, a simple, blue dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. Luke wore a button-down shirt and the only tie he owned, usually reserved for holidays and funerals. You look beautiful, he told her as they prepared to leave, meaning it in a way that went beyond her appearance. Valeria smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. So do you. Handsome, I mean. The courthouse was crowded, and Valeria's hand found Luke's as they navigated the hallways, drawing strength from his steady presence. Their case was called, and they entered the courtroom together. Luke had expected to see David there, had prepared himself to face the man who had caused Valeria so much pain, but when they entered, there was no sign of him. The judge reviewed the case, noting David's absence. The respondent was properly served but has failed to appear, he stated, shuffling through the paperwork. Based on the evidence presented and the respondent's failure to contest, I am granting a permanent restraining order. Relief washed over Valeria's face as the judge explained the terms. David was to remain at least 500 feet away from her at all times, could not contact her directly or indirectly, could not go to her home or workplace. Your Honor, Valeria said, when the judge asked if she understood the terms, will this order be enforceable if I move to a different address in the future? Yes, the judge assured her. The order protects you, not just a specific location. If you move, the new address will be protected as well, though you should notify the court of any change. Valeria nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. She wasn't planning to run again, but knowing she had protection wherever she went gave her an additional sense of security. Outside the courthouse, Luke pulled her into a hug. It's done, he said. How does it feel? Like I can breathe again, Valeria replied, resting her head against his shoulder. Like I can finally start thinking about the future without fear, always clouding everything. They celebrated that evening with a special dinner at the farmhouse. Luke grilled steaks from a local ranch, and Valeria made a salad with greens and herbs from their garden. They ate by candlelight, toasting with glasses of wine to new beginnings and hard-won freedom. After dinner, they moved to the porch swing, the night air warm and fragrant with the scent of flowers. Fireflies blinked in the darkness, reminding Valeria of her mother's words about stars coming down to earth. Thank you, she said, breaking the comfortable silence. For everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Luke turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. You don't need to thank me, Valeria. You did the hard part. You found the courage to stop running, to fight back. But I couldn't have done it without you, she insisted, without knowing I had somewhere safe to land if things went wrong. Luke reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You'll always have that here. Always. Valeria leaned into his touch, her eyes meeting his. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken feelings and newfound possibilities, slowly giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Luke leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and questioning. Valeria responded with a soft sigh, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they finally pulled apart, her eyes were shining in the moonlight. I've wanted to do that for a while, Luke admitted, his voice husky. Me too, Valeria whispered. I was just afraid. And now she smiled, a smile full of hope and promise. Now I'm not afraid anymore, at least, not of this, not of us. Luke pulled her closer, and she nestled against him, their bodies fitting together as if designed for each other. They stayed that way for a long time, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness, content in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The following days took on a dreamlike quality, For Valeria, with the restraining order in place and no sign of David, she began to truly relax for the first time in months. The farm work continued, harvesting summer crops, preparing fields for fall planting, producing their growing line of specialty products, but now there was a new dimension to her relationship with Luke. Small touches as they passed each other in the greenhouse, stolen kisses while sorting produce, lingering glances across the dinner table, each moment a reminder that what was growing between them was as real and vital as the crops they tended. One evening, as they finished dinner, Luke seemed unusually quiet. Valeria noticed him checking his phone several times, a small frown creasing his forehead. "Is everything okay?" she asked as they cleared the table. Luke hesitated, then sighed. "Mike called earlier, the sheriff. David was spotted in town this morning." Valeria froze, a plate in her hand. "Here in this town?" Luke nodded, watching her carefully. "Mike said he was at the diner, asking questions about local farms. He didn't mention you or me specifically. But it's a small town, and people talk," Valeria finished, setting the plate down carefully. "He's looking for me." "We don't know that for sure," Luke said, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. "But Mike wanted us to be aware, just in case." Valeria took a deep breath, fighting the familiar surge of panic. "The restraining order is still in effect," Luke assured her, "and Mike knows about it. If David comes within 500 feet of you, he can be arrested." Valeria nodded, trying to take comfort in that fact. "What do we do now?" "We stay alert but go about our lives," Luke said firmly. "We don't let him control us through fear. And we make sure Mike knows immediately if David shows up here." Despite Luke's reassurances, sleep eluded Valeria that night. She lay awake in the guest house, listening to every creak and rustle, imagining David lurking in the shadows. By morning, she was exhausted but determined not to let fear dictate her actions again. She met Luke at the main house for breakfast, dark circles under her eyes betraying her sleepless night. He didn't comment, simply poured her a cup of coffee and squeezed her shoulder gently. "We have that delivery to the co-op today," he reminded her. "Do you still want to come, or would you rather stay here?" Valeria considered the question carefully. Part of her wanted to hide away at the farm, but a stronger part refused to retreat. "I'll come," she said decisively. "I'm not going to start hiding again." Luke smiled, pride in his eyes. "That's my queen," he said softly, the nickname no longer making her flinch. The delivery to the local food co-op went smoothly. Valeria helped. Luke unloads crates of fresh produce and jars of their specialty products, chatting easily with the co-op manager about upcoming harvest festivals and potential holiday orders. As they were preparing to leave, Valeria spotted a familiar figure across the street, watching them from beside a sleek black car. Her heart lurched, and she gripped Luke's arm. "It's him," she whispered. "David across the street." Luke looked up, his expression hardening as he saw the man leaning against the car, making no attempt to hide his presence. "Get in the truck," he said quietly. "Lock the doors. I'll be right there." "Luke, no," Valeria protested, the restraining order. "I know. I won't go near him. I'm just going to call Mike." Reluctantly, Valeria did as he asked, climbing into the truck and locking the doors. As Luke stepped away to make the call, through the windshield she could see David watching her, a smirk on his face that made her stomach churn. Luke returned a few minutes later, his expression grim. "Mike's on his way. We're supposed to stay put until he gets here." He climbed into the truck beside Valeria, taking her hand. "You okay?" She nodded, though her heart was racing. "I just want this to be over." "It will be," Luke promised, "one way or another." They sat in tense silence, watching as David continued to loiter across the street, occasionally checking his phone but never taking his eyes off their truck for long. After what felt like an eternity, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Mike Dawson stepped out, spoke briefly into his radio, then approached David. Even from a distance, Valeria could see David's posture change, straightening, becoming defensive. Luke's phone rang. "It's Mike," he said, answering it. "Yeah, we're still here, okay, we will." He hung up and turned to Valeria. "Mike's going to handle this. He wants us to head back to the farm while he deals with David. Is that safe?" Valeria asked, watching as Mike and David continued their conversation, tension evident in both men's postures. "Mike says yes. He's got backup on the way, and he's going to make sure David understands the consequences of violating the restraining order." Valeria hesitated, torn between wanting to see David held accountable and wanting to be as far away from him as possible. "Okay," she said finally, "let's go home." Luke started the truck and pulled away from the curb. In the side mirror, Valeria could see David watching them leave, his expression unreadable at this distance. Back at the farm, they tried to keep busy while waiting for news from Mike. Luke worked on the tractor that had been giving him trouble, while Valeria threw herself into canning tomatoes, the repetitive process helping to calm her nerves. Late in the afternoon, Mike's cruiser pulled up the driveway. Luke and Valeria met him on the porch, both tense with anticipation. "He's gone," Mike said without preamble. "I checked him into a motel last night, and he checked out an hour ago. Said he was heading back to the city." "And you believe him?" Luke asked skeptically. Mike shrugged. "I followed him to the highway myself, watched him get on the interstate heading east. Doesn't mean he won't come back, but for now, he's gone. Did he say why he was here? Valeria asked, needing to understand. Mike looked uncomfortable. He said he was just passing through, but he asked about you specifically at the diner this morning. When I confronted him about the restraining order, he claimed he didn't know you were living here, just heard rumors you might be in the area. That's a lie, Valeria said flatly. He saw us at the farmer's market. He knows exactly where I am. Well, he knows now that I know about the restraining order, Mike replied, and I made it very clear what would happen if he violated it. We seem to get the message. Thank you, Mike, Luke said, extending his hand to the sheriff. We appreciate you looking out for us. Mike shook Luke's hand, then tipped his hat to Valeria. Just doing my job. But you two stay alert, okay? And cool. Immediately if he shows up again. After Mike left, Valeria and Luke sat on the porch steps, processing the day's events. Do you think he's really gone? Valeria asked, leaning against Luke's solid presence. For now, maybe, Luke replied honestly. But people like David, they don't give up easily. Valeria nodded, having known the answer before she asked the question. So we stay vigilant. We do, Luke agreed. But we also don't let him stop us from living our lives. That would be giving him exactly what he wants control. Valeria considered this, drawing strength from Luke's certainty. You're right. We've worked too hard to let him take this away from us. Luke put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. That's my brave girl. They sat together as twilight descended, the farm gradually disappearing into shadow around them. Despite the day's stress, Valeria felt a strange sense of peace. David was still out there, still a threat, but she was no longer alone. She had Luke, had the law on her side, had a home worth fighting for. I was thinking, Luke said after a while, about the fall festival next month. The farm hasn't participated in years, but it might be good for business if we set up a booth, show off our new product line. Valeria smiled at his deliberate shift to normal, everyday concerns. I think that's a great idea. We could do sample tastings of the different infused oils, and maybe those dried herb wreaths you've been experimenting with. They're beautiful. They continued planning, purposefully focusing on the future rather than the shadow David had cast over their day. By the time they headed inside for dinner, Valeria felt her equilibrium returning. This was her life now, the farm, the work she loved, the man beside her. She wouldn't let fear steal it away. The next morning, Valeria woke early, determined to reclaim her routine after yesterday's disruption. She made coffee and carried a mug out to the flower garden, where the morning dew still clung to petals and leaves. The farm was peaceful at this hour, bathed in the gentle light of dawn. Valeria walked among her flowers, checking for signs of pests or diseased deadheading spent blooms to encourage new growth. This simple task, caring for living things, had become a form of meditation for her. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a shadow fell across the garden. Looking up, expecting to see Luke, she instead found herself face to face with David. Hello, Valeria, he said, his voice smooth as ever. Nice flowers. Valeria's heart hammered against her ribs, but she stood her ground, mentally calculating the distance to the house. You're violating the restraining order, she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. You need to leave. David laughed, softly, always so dramatic. I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about, Valeria replied, taking a step backward. And I have the right not to listen. Leave now, or I'm calling the sheriff. David's expression hardened. After everything I did for you, this is how you repay my restraining orders. Hiding out on some dirt farm, shacking up with a hick. Each word was designed to wound, to remind her of her place in his world. But Valeria was no longer that frightened woman who had fled in the night. What you did for me, she repeated incredulously. You mean controlling me, isolating me from my friends, making me feel worthless unless I was serving your needs. David took a step toward her, his charm dropping away to reveal the anger beneath. You were nothing when I found you. I gave you everything, a place to live, nice clothes, an identity, and you threw it all away. No, Valeria said firmly. You tried to make me into what you wanted, but I was never nothing. David, I was always someone. I just couldn't see it when I was with you. She took another step back, reaching into her pocket for her phone. This is your last warning. Leave now. David's face contorted with rage. You don't give me warnings. You ungrateful. But I do, came Luke's voice from behind David. He stood on the path, his expression calm but determined. And Valeria asked you to leave. I suggest you do it. David turned, sizing up Luke with contempt. This is between me and her. Mind your own business, farmer. Valeria is my business, Luke replied evenly. And you're trespassing on private property, not to mention violating a court order. David sneered. What are you going to do about it? Fight me. I've got 50 pounds on you. Easy. Luke didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he held up his phone. No need for fighting. I've already called Sheriff Dawson. He's on his way. And I've been recording this entire conversation as evidence of your violation. Uncertainty flickered across David's face for the first time. You're bluffing, am I? Luke asked, turning the phone so David could see the active recording. Want to stick around and find out what happens when Mike gets here? He wasn't too happy about having to run you out of town yesterday. David looked from Luke to Valeria and back again, calculation clear in his eyes. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over, he said to Valeria. You can't hide behind restraining orders and boyfriends forever. Actually, she can, Luke replied. That's exactly what restraining orders are for, and I'm not going anywhere. A muscle twitched in David's jaw, but he turned and walked back toward the driveway where his car was parked. Luke moved to stand beside Valeria, putting a protective arm around her shoulders as they watched David drive away. Are you okay? Luke asked once the car was out of sight. Valeria realized she was trembling, reaction setting in now that the confrontation was over. I think so, she said. Did you really call Mike? Luke nodded. As soon as I saw David from the kitchen window, he should be here any minute. True to his word, Sheriff Dawson's cruiser appeared on the driveway shortly after, and Luke filled him in on what had happened. Mike took detailed notes, his expression growing increasingly grim. I'll put out an APB on his vehicle, he said, when Luke finished. He's looking at serious charges, now violating the restraining order, trespassing, making threats. We'll find him. Thank you, Mike, Valeria said, finding her voice at last. I appreciate everything you're doing. Mike's expression softened. No one deserves to be harassed like this, Ms. Cruz. We'll do everything we can to make sure you're safe. After Mike left to begin the search for David, Luke and Valeria sat at the kitchen table, cups of fresh coffee untouched before them. I'm sorry, Luke said finally. I should have been with you. Should have known he might come here. Valeria reached for his hand. This isn't your fault, Luke. None of it is. And I'm not sorry it happened. Luke looked at her in surprise. You're not? No, Valeria said thoughtfully. Because for the first time, I stood up to him. I didn't run, didn't hide, didn't let him intimidate me. I faced him and told him the truth. Pride shone in Luke's eyes. You did. You are magnificent. Valeria smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders despite the morning stress. It felt good, finally saying those things to him, and having you there. ... She squeezed his hand. It reminded me that I'm not alone anymore, that I have someone worth fighting for. Luke raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Always, he promised. Or as long as you want me. Valeria's smile deepened, reaching her eyes. That might be a very long time, Luke Jennings. I'm counting on it, he replied, love plain in his gaze. Later that day, Mike called with news. They had located David at a gas station 20 miles away and taken him into custody. He would be held pending a hearing for violating the restraining order, with additional charges possible depending on the district attorney's assessment. The news brought a mixture of relief and vindication. For the first time since David had entered her life, Valeria felt truly free of him, not because he was gone, he had been gone before, only to return, but because she had faced her fear and emerged stronger that evening. As the sun set over Silver Oak Farm, casting long shadows across the fields they had tended together, Luke took Valeria's hand and led her to the center of the flower garden she had created. I have something to ask you, he said, suddenly nervous in a way she had never seen before, and I want to do it here, among the flowers you brought back to life, because that's what you did for this farm. What you did for me. Valeria's heart quickened as Luke took both her hands in his. I know it hasn't been long, he continued, and if you think it's too soon, I understand, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He took a deep breath. Valeria Cruz, will you marry me? Not right away if you're not ready, but someday. Will you build a life with me here? Make this farm our home, grow old with me among these fields and flowers? Tears filled Valeria's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Luke, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I will grow old with you. Yes to all of it. Luke's face lit up with happiness, and he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his exuberance. When he set her down, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. It was my grandmother's, he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. If you'd prefer something different, it's perfect, Valeria interrupted, holding out her hand. It's absolutely perfect. Luke slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit as if made for her. Then he kissed her, a kiss full of promises and dreams and a future brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. As a last light of day faded around them, Valeria and Luke stood in the garden they had tended together, surrounded by the flowers that had become a symbol of their love, beautiful, resilient, thriving despite the odds. Here, Luke whispered against her hair, you'll always be treated like a queen. And Valeria, who had once flinched at those words, now embraced them fully. And you, she replied, will always be my king. Together they walked back to the farmhouse, hand in hand, leaving the shadows behind and stepping into the light of their shared future at Silver Oak Farm. News of Luke and Valeria's engagement spread quickly through the small town. Customers at the farm stand offered congratulations, and the ladies at the church sent over a homemade quilt as an early wedding gift. For the first time, Valeria felt accepted as part of the community, not just a stranger passing through. Court date for David's hearing came and went. He was found guilty of violating the restraining order and sentenced to 6 months in county jail, with 3 years of probation to follow. The terms of his probation included mandatory counseling and a strict prohibition against contacting Valeria in any way. "It's really over," Valeria said as they drove home from the courthouse. "I never thought I'd see him face consequences for his actions." Luke reached across the seat to take her hand, the engagement ring glinting in the sunlight. "Justice was a long time coming, but it finally arrived. Because of you," Valeria said softly. "You gave me the strength to fight back." Luke shook his head. "The strength was always there, Valeria. You just needed a safe place to find it again." As summer faded into fall, Silver Oak Farm transformed with the changing season. The fields were harvested, the trees along the driveway turned brilliant gold, and preparations for the winter months began in earnest. Luke and Valeria worked side by side, their partnership deepening with each passing day. The farm was thriving under their combined efforts. Valeria's business acumen and Luke's farming expertise had turned what was once a struggling operation into a successful enterprise. Their specialty products were now carried in shops throughout the county, and they had even received inquiries from a high-end grocery chain in the city. "We should set a date," Luke said one crisp October evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the main house. For the wedding, Valeria looked up from the seed catalog she was browsing. "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted. "What about December, after the fall harvest but before the holiday rush?" "December sounds perfect," Luke agreed, his eyes warm as he gazed at his fiancée. "Small ceremony, just close friends." Valeria nodded. "I'd like that. Here at the farm, if that's okay with you." "I can't think of a better place," Luke said. "Where we found each other, where we built this life together." The wedding plans came together with the same practical efficiency that characterized everything Luke and Valeria did. No elaborate decorations or fancy catering, just simple beauty and honest celebration. Valeria found a cream-colored dress at a boutique in town, elegant in its simplicity. Luke had his father's old suit tailored to fit him, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future. They decided to hold the ceremony in the greenhouse, which would be warm even in December and could be beautifully decorated with the plants they had tended together. Mike Dawson's wife, Sarah, offered to bake the cake, and several neighbors volunteered to provide food for the reception. As the wedding day approached, Valeria found herself thinking often of her parents, wishing they could be there to see her happiness. One evening, as she was sorting through the few mementos she had managed to keep during her months of running, she came across a small framed photo of her mother and father. "I wish you could meet Luke," she told the smiling faces in the picture. "You would have loved him, and he would have loved you." The sound of a vehicle on the gravel driveway pulled her from her thoughts. Looking out the window of the guest house, she saw an unfamiliar car parking beside Luke's truck. A woman stepped out, tall, with dark hair similar to Valeria's own, her posture hesitant as she looked around the farm. Valeria's heart leaped to her throat. "Elena," she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. She rushed outside, not bothering with a jacket despite the November chill. The woman turned at the sound of footsteps, and her face lit up with recognition. "Valeria, is it really you, Elena?" Valeria cried, running to embrace her sister. They collided in a tangle of arms and tears, holding each other as if afraid the other might disappear. "How did you find me?" Valeria asked when they finally pulled apart, wiping tears from her cheeks. Elena smiled through her own tears. "Your fiancé called me, Luke. He tracked me down through Mom's old address book that you mentioned once. Said he thought you might want your sister at your wedding." Valeria turned to see Luke standing on the porch of the main house, watching the reunion with a gentle smile. She mouthed thank you to him, and he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Come inside," Valeria said to Elena, linking her arm through her sister's. "I have so much to tell you, and I want you to meet Luke properly." The days that followed were filled with laughter and catching up. Elena fit seamlessly into life at Silver Oak Farm, helping with wedding preparations and getting to know Luke. The sisters stayed up late into the night, rebuilding the bond that had been strained by distance. And Valeria's troubled relationship with David. "I tried to find you," Elena confessed one evening, "after you stopped answering my calls. I was so worried." "I know," Valeria said softly. "I was ashamed, afraid you'd say I told you so about David." Elena shook her head. "I would never. I just wanted to know you were safe." "I am now," Valeria assured her, glancing toward the main house where Luke was visible through the window, building a fire in the hearth. "Safer than I've ever been." December arrived with a dusting of snow that transformed Silver Oak Farm into a winter wonderland. The silver oaks that gave the farm its name stood like sentinels along the drive, their bare branches glistening with frost in the morning light. On the day before the wedding, Valeria stood in the greenhouse, supervising the final decorations. Fairy lights had been strung among the plants, and white flowers from the greenhouse itself had been arranged to create a simple but elegant backdrop for the ceremony. "It's beautiful," Elena said, coming to stand beside her sister, "like something from a fairy tale." Valeria smiled, looking around at the space that had become so dear to her. "It is, isn't it? Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life now." "You deserve it," Elena said firmly. "After everything you've been through, you deserve all the happiness in the world." That evening, following tradition, Valeria stayed in the guest house with Elena while Luke remained in the main house. They had agreed to this small separation, making their reunion at the altar all the more meaningful. Unable to sleep, Valeria stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit farm. So much had changed in the months since she had first arrived here, desperate and afraid. The woman who had walked up that long gravel driveway with nothing but a small bag and a broken spirit seemed like a stranger now. "Thank you," she whispered, to whatever fate or providence had led her to Silver Oak Farm, to Luke, to this moment on the eve of her wedding. Morning dawned clear and cold, the winter sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. In the guest house, Elena helped Valeria dress for her wedding day, buttoning the delicate cream-colored dress and arranging her hair in a simple updo adorned with small white flowers from the greenhouse. "Something old," Elena said, fastening a pearl necklace around Valeria's neck. "This was Mum's. I've been keeping it for you." Tears welled in Valeria's eyes as she touched the pearls. "I remember her wearing this on special occasions. And this is something new," Elena continued, handing Valeria a small box. Inside was a bracelet of silver and blue stones. "From me, to match your eyes." "It's beautiful," Valeria whispered, allowing her sister to fasten it around her wrist. "Something borrowed," Elena said next, pinning a small brooch to the sash of Valeria's dress. "From Sarah Dawson. She said it brought her luck on her wedding day." "And something blue?" Valeria asked with a smile. Elena pointed to the bracelet. "The stones are blue topaz, December's birthstone for your December wedding." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mike Dawson stood there in his best suit, looking slightly uncomfortable but pleased. "The guests are all here," he said, "and Luke is waiting in the greenhouse. Are you ready?" Valeria took a deep breath, smoothing her dress one last time. "I'm ready." Since both her parents were gone, Valeria had asked Mike to walk her down the aisle. Thank you for his role in bringing David to justice and helping her find safety. He had accepted with gruff emotion. Honored by the request, Elena went ahead to the greenhouse, where a small gathering of friends and neighbors had assembled. Soft music played as Valeria took Mike's arm and began the short walk from the guest house. The path to the greenhouse had been cleared of snow and lined with lanterns that glowed warmly in the winter morning. As they approached, Valeria could see through the glass walls that the greenhouse was transformed, a magical space filled with greenery, flowers, and the faces of people who had become her community. And there, waiting at the end of the makeshift aisle, stood Luke. He wore his father's suit, freshly tailored, and a simple boutonniere of herbs from their garden. But it was his expression that caught Valeria's breath, pure love and wonder as he watched her approach. Mike placed Valeria's hand in Luke's with a nod of approval, then stepped aside. The minister, a kind-faced woman from the local church, smiled at the couple before addressing the gathered friends. "We are here today to witness the union of two souls who found each other against all odds," she began. "Luke and Valeria have written their own vows, which they will now share." Luke took both of Valeria's hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "Valeria Cruz," he said, his voice steady and sure. "When you walked up that driveway all those months ago, you changed everything. You brought light back to this farm, purpose back to my days, and love back to my heart." He squeezed her hands gently. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings us, to be your partner in all things, to create a home with you where you will always feel safe, valued, and cherished. I promise to tend to our love as carefully as we tend to this land, nurturing it through all seasons." Tears glistened in Valeria's eyes as she began her own vows. "Luke Jennings," she said, her voice soft but clear. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I had forgotten how to believe in myself. You offered me shelter without asking for anything in return." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I promise to be your partner in all things, in work and rest, in joy and sorrow, to build a life with you that honors the gift we've been given, to love you fully and fearlessly, the way you taught me to love myself again." Their simple gold bands were exchanged, Luke's father's ring for him, and a delicate band that matched her engagement ring for Valeria. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Luke leaned forward to kiss his bride. A kiss full of promise and love that drew approving smiles and a few happy tears from their guests. The reception was held in the barn, which had been swept clean and decorated with more fairy lights and greenery. Tables were laden with food prepared by neighbors, and Sarah Dawson's cake stood proudly at the center, a simple two-tier creation adorned with herbs and flowers from the greenhouse. Music played from an old record player that had belonged to Luke's parents, and the small group of friends and neighbors danced and celebrated well into the afternoon. Valeria found herself surrounded by love and acceptance, a belonging she had never expected to find again after losing her parents. As the winter sun began to set, casting golden light through the barn windows, Luke pulled Valeria into a quiet corner. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around her waist. "More than I knew was possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for finding Elena, having her here. It means everything." Luke kissed the top of her head. "Family is important, and now she's my family too." Valeria looked up at him, her heart full. "I love you, Luke Jennings." "And I love you, Valeria Jennings," he replied. the new name making her smile that as the celebration continued around them. Valeria thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the terrified woman running from her past to the bride surrounded by love and possibility, it seemed almost impossible to believe. Later, as the last guests departed and the winter night settled over Silver Oak Farm, Luke and Valeria stood on the porch of the main house, their house now, as they had decided to make it their home together while keeping the guest house for visitors like Elaine. "So," Luke said, his arm around his wife's shoulders, "was it everything you hoped for, our wedding day?" Valeria leaned into him, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear winter sky. "It was perfect," she replied. "Simple and true, like us." Luke smiled. "Like us," he agreed. "Though I'm not sure how simple our story has been." "Maybe not simple," Valeria conceded with a laugh, "but true. Every step of it brought us here, together." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, contemplating the farm that had become the foundation of their shared life. The fields lay dormant under a blanket of snow, waiting for spring and new growth, a cycle of renewal that seemed fitting for their new beginning. "I have something for you," Luke said finally, reaching into his pocket. "A wedding gift." He handed Valeria a small box, similar to the one that had held her engagement ring. Inside was a key, gleaming silver against the velvet lining. "Another key to the house?" Valeria asked, confused. "But I already have one." Luke shook his head. "Not to the house. To the old cottage at the north end of the property. The one my grandparents built when they first started the farm." Valeria looked at him in surprise. "The stone cottage? But it's been abandoned for years. You said it needed too much work to be usable." "It did," Luke agreed. "But I've been working on it, whenever I could spare a few hours. Alina helped these past few days, while you were busy with wedding preparations." "That's where you two kept disappearing too?" Valeria asked, understanding dawning. "I thought you were just showing her around the property." Luke nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "It's not finished, yet still needs a lot of work. But I hoped it could be a special place for us, somewhere that's just ours, that we restore together." Tears welled in Valeria's eyes for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Like the greenhouse when I first arrived," she said softly, "broken but full of possibility." "Exactly," Luke said, love evident in his gaze. "Want to see it now?" I set up lights so we could walk over safely. Hand in hand, they made their way across the snowy fields, following a path of solar lanterns Luke had placed earlier. The cottage appeared out of the darkness, a small stone building with a new roof and repaired windows that glowed with warm light from within. Asterisk, asterisk, "You've already done so much," Valeria breathed as they approached. Asterisk, asterisk, Luke opened the door with an old iron key that matched the one he had given her. Inside the cottage was simple but charming, one large room with a fireplace at one end, where a fire already burned cheerfully. The walls had been freshly plastered, and the wooden floor had been sanded and polished to a warm glow. Asterisk, asterisk, "It's just the basics for now," Luke explained as Valeria walked round, taking it all in. "But I thought we could decide together how to finish it. Make it our special place." Asterisk, asterisk, in front of the fireplace, he had arranged a small sitting area with comfortable chairs and a low table. On the table sat a bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, and a small wrapped package. Asterisk, asterisk, "One more gift," he said, handing her the package. "Something to remind you of how our story began." Asterisk, asterisk, Valeria unwrapped it carefully to find a small silver plaque, engraved with the words, "Here, you'll be treated like a queen." Asterisk, asterisk, "To hang by the door," Luke explained, "so you never forget my promise from that first day." Asterisk, asterisk, Valeria traced the words with her fingertip, remembering how she had flinched when he first said them, how impossible they had seemed after all she had endured. Asterisk, asterisk, "I won't forget," she said softly, "but now I know what those words really mean. Not flattery or empty promises, but true respect and love." Asterisk, asterisk, Luke pulled her into his arms, holding her close in the warm light of the fire. "That's all I ever wanted to give you," he said. "A place where you could heal, where you could be valued for exactly who you are." Asterisk, asterisk, "You gave me that and more," Valeria replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You gave me back myself. And then you gave me a future I never dared to dream of." Asterisk, asterisk, as the winter night deepened outside, Luke and Valeria celebrated their first night as husband and wife in the cottage that would become their special retreat. The champagne was opened, toasts were made, and promises whispered in the FIRELIGHT. Asterisk, asterisk, later, as Luke slept beside her, Valeria lay awake, watching the dying embers of the fire and reflecting on the journey that had brought her to Silver Oak Farm. From the moment she had stood at the bottom of those porch steps, desperate and afraid, to this night of perfect contentment, it was a transformation she could scarcely believe. Asterisk, asterisk, "Thank you," she whispered again, this time to the sleeping man beside her, for seeing her worth when she couldn't see it herself, for treating her with kindness when she expected cruelty, for loving her scars and all. Asterisk, asterisk, spring came early to Silver Oak Farm that year. By March the first green shoots were pushing through. The soil, and the greenhouse was full of seedlings ready for planting. Luke and Valeria worked together preparing the fields, their partnership now sealed in marriage but unchanged in its fundamental balance of strengths. The cottage had become their weekend retreat, a place to escape the demands of the farm and focus just on each other. They had finished it together over the winter months, adding personal touches that made it uniquely theirs. The silver plaque hung proudly beside the door, a daily reminder of how far they had come. Alina visited often, sometimes staying for weeks at a time in the guest house. She had taken a remote job that allowed her to work from anywhere, and Silver Oak Farm had become as much a sanctuary for her as it had for Valeria. The sisters made up for lost time, rebuilding their relationship on stronger foundations. The farm continued to prosper under Luke and Valeria's care. Their specialty products had gained a loyal following, and they had expanded into hosting small farm-to table dinners in the renovated barn during the summer months. What had once been a struggling family farm was now a thriving business that honored tradition while embracing innovation. One warm evening in May, as Valeria tended to her flower garden, now expanded to include a rainbow of blooms that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds, Luke joined her with 2 glasses of lemonade. Taking a break, she asked, accepting a glass gratefully. Thought we could both use one, he replied, settling onto the garden bench beside her. The north field is all planted. We're ahead of schedule this year. Valeria leaned against him, enjoying the simple pleasure of a moment's rest after a day of good work. I was thinking, she said after a comfortable silence, about how quickly things can change. Luke nodded, understanding in his eyes. A year ago, you hadn't even arrived here yet. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else, Valeria said, looking around at the farm that had become her home, at the man who had become her heart. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen your sign that day, if I'd kept driving. I believe we would have found each other somehow, Luke said, taking her hand. Some things are just meant to be. Valeria smiled, squeezing his hand. Like us, he agreed, leaning in to kiss her softly. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the fields of Silver Oak Farm, Valeria and Luke remained in the garden, surrounded by the flowers they had planted together, a living symbol of their love, rooted deeply and blooming beautifully in the fertile soil of the life they had built. In the distance, the silver oaks that gave the farm its name caught the last rays of sunlight, their leaves shimmering like a benediction over all that grew beneath them. And in the heart of it all, Valeria Cruz Jennings, once broken, now healed, once lost, now found, sat beside the man who had kept his promise from that very first day. Here, she was indeed treated like a queen, not with empty flattery or false worship, but with the profound respect and genuine love that every heart deserves. And in return, she had given Luke the same love that saw his worth, that honored his dreams, that made Silver Oak Farm not just a place of work, but a true home. As twilight descended and the first stars appeared overhead, Valeria rested her head on Luke's shoulder, content in the knowledge that their story, a story of healing, of second chances, of love that transforms, was still being written, day by day, season by season, in the fertile soil of Silver Oak Farm. We should head in, Luke said after a while, though he made no move to rise. Early start tomorrow. Just a few more minutes, Valeria replied, unwilling to break the peaceful spell of the evening. Let's just be here, together, a little longer. Luke smiled, pulling her closer. We have all the time in the world, my queen, all the time in the world, and they did, a lifetime stretching before them, full of promise and possibility, rooted in the love they had found at Silver Oak Farm. The end.